The void was calm until the ghosts appeared. Commander Elena Reyes sat in the dim blue glow of Lunar Observation Station EOS, her eyes tracing the cold dance of numbers streaming across the hologrid. For months, the silence beyond Neptune had been absolute. No ships, no transmissions, just the quiet pulse of Earth's distant orbit. Then, in a single breath, that silence cracked. The long-range sensors trembled to life, bleeding static across every frequency. Faint signatures began to appear, first one, then a dozen, then more. Unknown mass readings, irregular trajectories, low thermal emissions like dying embers drifting through a cosmic graveyard. Reyes leaned forward, narrowing her eyes. "Talk to me," she muttered, and the AI flickered, trying to parse the data. No known configuration, no registry tags, no communication codes. Just movement slow, broken, desperate. The screen zoomed in. 27 vessels, scattered and tumbling toward the inner system. Their hulls looked melted in places, fractured like glass under pressure. Then faintly, from the static, a visual burst emerged, a flicker of light repeating at precise intervals. The AI auto-decoded, struggling through hundreds of encryption layers until, finally, one word shimmered on the display. "Help." Reyes felt her breath catch. "Confirm that translation," she ordered. "Cross-language verification, all protocols." The computer hesitated before replying, "Cross-confirmed in 1462 code variants. Message consistent. Plea for assistance." She rubbed her temples, heart thudding. Out here, far from Earth's politics and media glare, she had expected dull patrols and cosmic dust, not the kind of discovery that could rewrite history. "Open a wideband channel," she said. "Try every frequency, every modulation." Static answered her. The ships were not speaking anymore. They were dying. As the drifting fleet entered the outer defense perimeter, emergency alerts began flooding in from ground command. Earth Defense, the UN Space Authority, even civilian news networks, all demanding answers she didn't have. Were they hostile? Were they contagious? Were they human? Reyes ignored the questions, eyes locked on the sensor feed. One vessel's power core had collapsed entirely, its oxygen levels unreadable. The human instinct in her screamed louder than protocol. She stood, voice steady but tight. "Prep Recovery Team 1. Full quarantine procedure. I want med bays ready and drones on standby." Her second officer hesitated. "Commander, Earth Command hasn't authorized. They will," she snapped. "But those ships won't last until they decide to find their courage." Within an hour, shuttles from EOS launched toward the drifting flotilla, their running lights slicing through the black. As the first boarding drones clamped onto a cracked hull, video feeds streamed back interiors, blackened with soot-twisted metal. Empty corridors littered with strange crystalline debris that glittered like frozen tears. Then the cameras found movement. A shape, humanoid, crawling weakly across the floor. The creature was skeletal, skin faintly luminous beneath layers of soot and dried fluid. Its eyes, huge and glass-clear, stared into the lens before flinching away as if from a predator. There were more 5, maybe 6 huddled together, trembling, their thin limbs covered in old scars that looked more like brands than wounds. Reyes felt her chest tighten. "Open internal comms," she said quietly. "Broadcast universal greeting pattern. Low frequency." The drone speaker crackled softly as it played the melody humanity had chosen for peace centuries ago. A simple rising tone meant to symbolize breath, life, invitation. The aliens stirred, heads lifting, their eyes reflecting blue light. Then, one of them small, maybe a child, stumbled forward. Its voice came through the broken translator, like the wind through shattered glass. "You're?" Not them? Reyes froze. She didn't know who them was, but the fear in that question was older than any war she'd ever fought. The child collapsed moments later, its faint bioluminescence fading like a candle guttering in vacuum. Without waiting for orders, Reyes transmitted override codes to the recovery shuttles. "Bring them aboard," she said, her voice trembling with resolve. All of them. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew she was breaking every line of the quarantine charter. But as the first survivors were lifted from the wreckage, their thin hands clinging to human gloves like drowning souls clutching air, she felt something shift deep inside her, a quiet, unspoken truth echoing through the void. This was not a rescue. It was the beginning of humanity's greatest test. They called them the Children of Vera, though the name came later. After linguists spent sleepless nights deciphering the sounds the survivors used to describe themselves. For now, they were just the refugees, silent, skeletal shapes housed behind shimmering quarantine fields aboard Lunar Station EOS. Commander Elena Reyes watched from the observation deck as the med teams worked, their suits reflecting the dim blue light of the isolation bays. The aliens were fragile, almost translucent, their veins glowing faintly beneath skin that shimmered like opal under the sterilized lights. Most didn't speak. They barely moved. But their eyes, huge and filled with shimmering liquid, followed every human who entered, wide with something between terror and disbelief. When the doctors brought in Dr. Marcus Hawley, the xenobiologist assigned to their study, the air in the med bay changed. Hawley was a quiet man, known for his patience and his disarming kindness, not his rank or reputation. He entered without the usual detachment of a scientist facing history. He moved as one might approach wounded animals, slow, careful, deliberate. The first alien he approached lay curled on a biobed, heart rate erratic, body temperature dropping. Hawley crouched down, speaking softly, though he knew they wouldn't understand the words. "You're safe now," he said, his voice low and human. "No one's going to hurt you here." The creature's eyes blinked, twin drops of light reflecting his faceplate. Then, unexpectedly, it reached out a trembling hand and brushed the surface of his suit. The monitor flashed wild for a heartbeat. "Empathic reaction," the medic whispered. "Their nervous system's reading us." Within minutes, the others stirred to some whispering to each other, their tones melodic but trembling. The translator units struggled to keep up, spitting out fragments that made Hale's stomach twist. Hiding, paying, escape, earned sky, children taken. Later that night, he reviewed the recordings in the dark of his quarters. The data suggested they had been hunted for generations, driven from world to world by an empire that called itself the Hierarchy. The refugees were not soldiers or explorers. They were the last survivors of an extermination. Hawley played one clip again, isolating the trembling voice of a small alien the medics had nicknamed Lyra. Her translation was broken, halting, but the meaning bled through. "They come with fire. Make us kneel. Cut light from the sky." He paused the file, staring at the screen as silence pressed down. Humanity had dreamed of contact for centuries, but no one had imagined first contact would come like this, with ghosts fleeing their own apocalypse. Over the following days, Hawley made it his mission to reach them, not through analysis, but through gentleness. He brought light projections instead of weapons, music instead of orders. The aliens, Verans, as they came to call themselves, responded in kind. One of them traced shapes in the condensation on the quarantine glass, mirroring Hale's movements. Another tried to hum along when he played an old Earth lullaby. But beneath every gesture was fear. Even in sleep, their bodies tensed at sudden sounds, their bioluminescence flickering in patterns that the linguists later translated as distress signals. Hawley asked Reyes for permission to temporarily suspend the isolation barrier for a brief physical reading, arguing it would help calm them. You're asking me to violate quarantine protocol for emotional comfort? Reyes said, arms crossed. Yes, he replied simply. Because logic isn't what they need right now. They need to believe we're not the next monsters. Against her better judgment, she allowed it. Hale stepped into the chamber, feeling the thin hum of the barrier drop behind him. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on hot steel. Lyra was awake, her eyes reflecting the light from his wrist scanner. She flinched as he approached, but didn't retreat. He knelt, setting the device aside, holding up empty hands. See? He said softly. No tools. No weapons. Just me. The translator at her side flickered to life, garbling his words into broken tones. She tilted her head, uncertain. Then, after a long pause, she whispered something that cut through him more sharply than any data reading ever could. The translator processed it slowly, then spoke in a child's trembling voice. You will not hurt. Hale swallowed hard, his throat tight. No, he said, his voice shaking. No one hurts you again. I promise. The translator echoed his words in her own language. Lyra blinked once, twice, then pressed her small palm to his. The contact sent a faint ripple of light racing up her arm, as if her body was learning to trust warmth again. Outside the glass, Reyes watched, her jaw set but her eyes wet. Humanity's first contact wasn't a triumph of science or diplomacy, was a quiet promise made in the language of compassion. And deep in her gut, she knew the universe was listening. The world was no longer watching from the sidelines. 2 weeks after the children of Vera were rescued from the dying fleet, the news had reached every corner of Earth. The transmission leaked from Lunar. Station EOS an image of Commander Reyes standing beside Dr. Marcus Hale, both framed by the shimmering isolation field behind which the alien sat, fragile and luminous. The public saw not monsters, but victims. Some wept, some raged, some feared, but no one could ignore it. And so the greatest debate in human history began not in laboratories or war rooms, but in the sprawling halls of the United Earth Assembly in Geneva Arcology, where politicians, scientists, and generals fought over the meaning of mercy. Ambassador Rena Solberg stood at the podium beneath the holographic dome that displayed the stars, the same stars from which the refugees had fled. The Varens came to us with nothing, she began, her voice echoing. No weapons, no ships capable of fighting, no demands. Only a word repeated across light years. Help. If we turn them away, we are not protecting humanity, we are betraying it. Her opponents countered fiercely. And what happens, one delegate from the Pacific Coalition asked, when the monsters that chased them here come looking? Do you expect us to fight a war for strangers? Another shouted, they could be carriers of disease, of technology that compromises our security. We know nothing about them. But others rose to answer. An African Union representative spoke of old wars fought over fear, and how compassion had always been the only lasting victory. The debates raged for hours, the room vibrating with emotion and exhaustion, until Rena silenced the hall with a gesture. You all saw the footage, she said. The scars. The way the child flinched when a doctor reached out. The Virens have been tortured beyond reason, yet still they ask for peace. Ask yourselves, what would we want if the roles were reversed? In orbit, Commander Reyes followed the broadcast in silence from her quarters. Below, Marcus watched from the med bay, Lyra asleep beside him, her faint glow pulsing in rhythm with her heart. Humanity's fate and theirs was being decided by words and fears and votes, and all he could do was wait. When the assembly recessed, the world erupted into chaos. Protests filled the streets of the megacities. Some carried signs that read, "We are all refugees." Others demanded isolation. shouting Earth for humans. Yet amidst the turmoil, something quiet began to bloom, a movement of volunteers. Medics, engineers, offering to help the Virans rebuild. Humanity, fractured though it was, still remembered its own pain. The final vote came 20 hours later, presided over by President Ari Nakamura. She stood before the delegates, weary but resolute, her voice carrying the weight of Earth's conscience. "We stand at the threshold of something greater than power or progress," she said. "We stand at the choice between compassion and fear. Throughout our history, we have been the refugees, the exiles, the broken. And in those moments, someone always had to decide whether to open the door." She paused, letting the silence deepen. "Today, we choose to open it." The vote tally began to scroll across the display nation by nation, world by world. Yes. 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 The board filled with light until there was no darkness left. The motion passed unanimously. The Earth had spoken. Humanity would offer asylum. In the med bay above the moon, Marcus Halle looked up as the transmission came through. He turned to Lyra and smiled softly, even though she couldn't yet understand. "You have a home now?" he whispered. Commander Reyes, standing on the bridge, released a long, shuddering breath. "Transmit all ships," she said. "Earth welcomes the Varans." Far below, billions of people stared up at the night sky, unaware that their world had just changed forever. Some feared the stars a little more that night. Others, for the first time in history, looked up and saw not darkness. At neighbors. 6 months later, the stars above Earth shimmered with construction lights as humanity built a home for the broken. They called it Haven, a ringed habitat suspended between Earth and the moon, half steel and half dream. What began as a quarantine station had become a sanctuary, a joint effort between nations, scientists, and the refugees themselves. Commander Elena Reyes watched from the viewport of the EOS command deck as the structure grew piece by piece, its modules glinting against the black like scattered jewels. Cargo haulers drifted in slow formation, bringing everything from atmosphere processors to hydroponic domes, while teams of human engineers and Viren technicians worked side by side in pressure suits. The air on the station no longer smelled sterile. It smelled faintly of ozone, metal, and life. Dr. Marcus Halle lived among the Virans now, his days filled with long hours in the med labs, and his nights spent listening to their songs. They weren't sung aloud, their melodies were transmitted through faint vibrations and soft color pulses, emotion rendered visible. The first time he heard one, he'd wept without understanding why. Lyra had recovered enough to walk, though she still flinched at loud noises. She clung to a pendant he'd made for her, a simple piece of lunar glass etched with a spiral, representing light returning. She'd told him, through broken translator speech, that the spiral meant family in her tone. He told her it meant the same thing now. As the weeks passed, Haven began to feel less like an experiment and more like a promise fulfilled. The Virans planted crystalline gardens in the hydro bays, their growth accelerated by resonance fields tuned their emotional harmonics. Human children visiting from the Lunar Academy were mesmerized by the way the plants shimmered like frozen rainbows under artificial sun. Artists from both species collaborated, blending color, light, and vibration into works of impossible beauty. When a Viren sculptor and a human painter unveiled the first joint creation, an enormous wave of luminous glass that changed hues with the viewer's heartbeat, it became the symbol of the new alliance. Still, not all was peace. Some human officers whispered about resource strain and cultural contamination. On the dark corners of the network, fearmongers spun stories of mind control and invasion. But for every voice of hate, there were 10 of hope teachers learning the Viren resonance language, doctors studying their healing biochemistry, engineers adapting their environmental tech to repair damaged Earth biomes. The cooperation began to heal more than the refugees. It began to heal humanity itself. One night, while overseeing the power relay systems, Reyes visited the observation deck where Marcus and Lyra sat watching Earth turn below, a glowing sphere of blues and whites. "She's beautiful," Marcus said quietly. "She's changing," Reyes replied. "We all are." Lyra looked up at them both, her pale eyes reflecting the planet's light. "No more running," she said slowly, the translator catching her soft accent. "No more hurt." Reyes smiled faintly. "No more hurt," she agreed. But even as she said it, the commander couldn't shake the unease that had been building in her gut. A pattern of faint sensor echoes had been appearing near Neptune's orbit, too regular, too deliberate to be debris. She hadn't told Marcus yet. Not until she knew for sure. Instead, she stood there, watching humanity and the Virans build something that had never existed before. A civilization founded not on conquest or profit, but on empathy. The laughter of workers echoed through the habitat's corridors. Children, human and alien alike, played together in zero gravity, their hands reaching across species and fear. For the first time in recorded history, two intelligent races had built peace from the ashes of pain. Reyes wanted to believe it would last. She wanted to believe that the ghosts the Varans had fled would never find them here. But beyond the bright curve of Earth's horizon, in the endless dark, something was stirring, unseen, unforgiving. And on the command deck of Ios, a proximity alert quietly blinked red. Unnoticed amidst the hum of creation. The warning came at 0300 hours Earth Standard Time. A cold pulse of red across every sensor feed in the Solar Defense Network. Commander Elena Reyes was halfway through her first real night of sleep in months when the alarm tore through the quiet. She bolted upright, disoriented, before the voice of her eye assistant filled the room. Unidentified signatures detected beyond Neptune. 47 vessels, entering system on direct trajectory. Estimated arrival, 72 hours. Rhea's stomach dropped. She was already moving before the report finished, pulling on her uniform and calling up the sensor feed. The screen came alive with silver threads of light, a fleet, enormous, precise, deliberate. They weren't wandering refugees this time. They were hunters. Within minutes, the entire chain of command erupted into motion. The images spread across encrypted channels, reaching Luna Command, the Earth Defense Council, and the United Assembly in Geneva. Dr. Marcus Hollow stood frozen in the med lab as the news replayed on a muted screen. Behind him, Lyra pressed close, sensing his unease through her empathic resonance. "They found us," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The hierarchy comes." Marcus turned toward her, unable to answer. He'd seen her memory's entire cities burning, oceans turned to steam, children buried beneath glass. He had hoped foolishly that the void would keep them safe. Now the nightmare was coming back. On Earth, the Assembly convened in emergency session. Some screamed for surrender, others for preemptive strike. Ambassador Rena Solberg stood amid the chaos and said the words that cut through it all. "This is the moment that will define what humanity is." President Ari Nakamura appeared via Hala from the Defense Council chamber, her face pale but resolute. "The hierarchy demands we hand over the Varans. I won't do it. We will not trade lives for safety." The response was instant and furious. "Then you condemn us to war," shouted a general. Nakamura didn't flinch. "No," she said. "We condemn ourselves if we give them up." In orbit, Reyes coordinated the mobilization. Every shipyard between Earth and Mars lit up as workers refitted cargo freighters, mining rigs, even passenger ferries with weapon pods and armor plating. Mars orbital foundries reactivated long decommissioned rail cannons. The asteroid miners volunteered to fight, turning their haulers into makeshift warships. For the first time in history, humanity acted as one world, united not by fear, but by defiance. When the Virans learned what was happening, they reacted with horror. "No," Ambassador Thera said to Reyes during a secure transmission. "You cannot fight for us. We will surrender ourselves. It is better that we die than see another world burn." Reyes shook her head. "You don't get to make that call anymore. We gave you our word. Your word will destroy you." "Maybe," Reyes said quietly, "but it's still our word." On Haven, panic spread among the Viran civilians. Marcus worked tirelessly to calm them, explaining, teaching, promising. When he returned to his quarters, Lyra was waiting, her eyes glowing faintly with the deep blue hue that meant sorrow. "They will come for me," she said. "For all of us." He knelt beside her. "Let them come," he said. "They'll find humanity waiting." Word of his statement leaked within hours. It spread across networks, across languages, becoming a rallying cry. If they come for the broken, they'll find all of us standing in their way. Streets filled with volunteers. RED soldiers reported to bases they hadn't seen in decades. Students built drones from salvaged parts. Humanity was no longer preparing for survival. It was preparing to protect its family. On the second night, the first of the Viran resonance devices went online, amplifying emotion into harmonic frequencies that could interfere with enemy systems. It wasn't a weapon, not in the traditional sense, but it was uniquely theirs a union of human ingenuity and Viran empathy. As the fleets assembled, Reyes stood before the viewing glass of Eos, watching Earth rise like a silent promise. She could see the faint ring of Haven glowing with life, the home they had built together. Somewhere inside, Marcus and Lyra waited. Somewhere inside, she still believed they might live through this. "Admiral Reyes," came the call from command. Incoming transmission from the Hierarchy fleet. She straightened her uniform. "Put it through." The screen filled with the image of a being half flesh, half machine, its voice cold and flawless. "You harbor fugitives. Surrender them, and Earth will be spared." Reyes met its mechanical gaze without blinking. "We don't surrender, family." The transmission cut. Silence filled the bridge. Beyond the glass, the stars burned quietly, as if holding their breath. Humanity had made its choice, and the countdown to its reckoning had begun. The Battle of Haven began in silence. No trumpet, no declaration of war, just the steady hum of reactors charging across the dark sea between worlds. From her command chair aboard the Eos Guardian, Admiral Elena Reyes stared into the void where the stars seemed to flicker under the approaching storm. The Hierarchy fleet had arrived in Formation 47 warships, black as obsidian, moving with the precision of a blade. At their center, a colossal flagship, kilometers long, radiated red energy from the scars in its hull like a beating mechanical heart. They advanced without haste, confident, absolute. Reyes didn't blink. "Signal to all units," she said, voice calm over the open channel. "Operation Dawnfire is a go." Across the solar system, humanity's improvised fleet came alive. Converted freighters, asteroid miners, and repurposed defense satellites lit up with energy, their engines painting arcs of blue flame against the darkness. From Mars, a network of drone carriers deployed a cloud of autonomous machines, tiny, darting shapes armed with EMP spikes and nuclear microcharges. From Luna's shadow, ships that had been silent now ignited. Dozens of them, human vessels flanked by smaller, silver-bodied Viran crafts, powered by resonance cores that shimmered like light, trapped in crystal. Every one of them bore the same signal on their hulls, projected in light. "No one hurts you again." The Hierarchy's commander appeared on every frequency, its voice metallic and cruel. "You cannot stand against us. Your ships are children's toys? You will break. Reyes leaned forward, her face illuminated by starlight. We've broken before, she said softly, and we learned how to rebuild. The fleets met near the orbit of Mars. The first salvo came from the hierarchy red lances of plasma, cutting through the void. Entire human squadrons vanished in bursts of light, ships dissolving into dust. But then the counterstrike came hundreds of drones launched from Mars' surface, each one carrying a nuclear payload. They swarmed like insects, overwhelming enemy targeting systems. The hierarchy's fleet fired wildly, destroying many, but not enough. Dozens broke through, detonating in synchronized pulses. Shields flared, failed, and parts of the enemy formation flickered out like dying stars. For every ship destroyed, 2 more closed the gap. The void became chaos, a storm of fire and wreckage. Reyes coordinated from the center, her hands moving across holographic controls, faster than her officers could speak. Guardian 3, break right, use the debris field as cover. Strike Group Delta, target the command vessel's stabilizers. Her voice was steel and calm, but her heart pounded. She thought of Marcus and Lyra, safe she hoped inside Haven's reinforced rings. On the surface of Haven, Dr. Marcus Hall ran through corridors thick with the scent of ozone and fear. The Virans were evacuating into the lower levels, their bioluminescence flickering in panic. Lyra stayed close, her eyes burning bright white. They feel it, she gasped. All of them. The hierarchy feels anger, fear, rage, but they don't understand. He grabbed her shoulders. Stay with me. Don't reach for them. Do you hear me? But Lyra shook her head. I have to. They'll kill you all if they can't feel. Before he could stop her, she placed her hands on the resonance core, powering the habitat. Her light intensified, flooding the chamber. Across the battlefield, sensors went haywire. The resonance frequencies spiked, not in destructive power, but in emotion. The hierarchy ships faltered mid-flight. Their formations broke as their crews, linked through the neural network that controlled their empire, were suddenly assaulted by feelings they had never known. Sorrow, empathy, love. The armada shuddered as if alive and confused. Admiral Reyes saw the opening. All units now. Focus fire. Railguns, plasma turrets, and mining lasers tore through the stunned enemy ranks. One of Earth's mass drivers, disguised for months as a decommissioned satellite, fired a tungsten rod the size of a shuttle. It ripped through the hierarchy flagship like a meteor through glass. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but every human ship saw it, felt it. The hierarchy fleet began to retreat, crippled, scattering toward the dark. Reyes exhaled slowly. Cease fire, she ordered. We've done enough. Then her calm officer's voice broke through, shaken. Ma'am, Haven's gone dark. Reyes' blood froze. She turned toward the sensor feed. The habitat was intact, but its energy readings had collapsed into silence. Get me a link, now. The screen flickered, static at first. Then Marcus appeared, face streaked with tears. Behind him, the light in the resonance chamber was fading. She did it, he whispered. She stopped them. She made them feel. Reyes swallowed. Where is she? He turned the camera. Lyra lay on the floor, her glow fading to nothing, her small hand pressed to the cooling crystal. She's gone. The connection cut, and the silence that followed was unbearable. The battle was over. The hierarchy had fled. Humanity had survived, but at the cost of the child who had taught 2 worlds what mercy meant. Days later, as Earth mourned its dead and rebuilt its fleet, the universe itself began to change. Reports came from deep space hierarchical colonies going dark, their leaders abandoning oppression, their neural networks fractured by an echo of something impossible. Some said it was a signal. Others, a miracle. But those who had fought that bay knew the truth. Lyra's consciousness hadn't vanished. It had spread. She had become a resonance in the stars, a living frequency of compassion. Months later, standing in the rebuilt observation dome of Haven, Admiral Reyes watched Earth turn beneath her. Blue and alive, Dr. Marcus Holley stood beside her, a faint glow pendant in his hands, the one Lyra used to wear. "Do you think she knew?" he asked. "She didn't need to," Reyes said softly. "She just believed." Outside, the stars shimmered differently now, as if listening. Humanity's promise had survived the fire. Across the void, the words whispered once more, not from a voice, but from everywhere at once. "No one hurts you again."